What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and before we even start this video, I'm going to tell you guys, this video has spoilers. So, if you don't like spoilers, don't watch this video. Having said that, in Age of Ultron, as we know, the Vision wields Thor's hammer. And so the question that you guys have been bombarding me with is, Rob, who can wield Thor's hammer? What's the deal with this? Make it make sense. And so because I'm Comics Explained, and because my goal is to make sure you guys understand what in the world is going on in Marvel Comics and all the intricacies and all that kind of good stuff, we're going to be covering that. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to go over a list pertaining to both DC and Marvel characters, but we're going to be leaving out the Asgardians. Now, keep in mind, some of these characters are able to wield Thor's hammer because in Thor's earlier continuity, if he was separated from his hammer for more than 60 seconds, he lost his powers, and he basically transformed into his human form of Donald Blake. Now, in addition to this, not all of the Marvel characters that wield Thor's hammer in the mainstream continuity are able to do this within the mainstream continuity proper. That is to say, some of the characters, like Black Widow, for example, wield Thor's hammer during the Age of Ultron What If alternate story, which of course is a character, I guess an event that we'll talk about here. But starting with Marvel Comics, the first person on our list is none other than Beta Ray Bill. Now, Beta Ray Bill has a special place in the hearts and minds of Thor fans everywhere because Beta Ray Bill was the first person to be able to wield Thor's hammer. Now, this comes about in Thor Volume 1, issue number 337, when we learn that Beta Ray Bill is a cyborg and that he was designed by the Corbinites in order to safeguard them as they were leaving their planet, which had already been destroyed, and traveling to a new planet. And so what happened is that along the way, they passed by the planet Earth, and when they did, S.H.I.E.L.D. registered their convoy of sorts, and they sent Thor to investigate. And so when Thor arrives to basically examine the convoy, that the ship of Beta Ray Bill, which is actually called Scuttlebutt, registers Thor as a possible threat. And so because of this, it activates Beta Ray Bill, and Beta Ray Bill and Thor end up getting into a fight. Now, while they're fighting one another, what ends up happening here is that Thor is separated from his hammer for 60 seconds. And the result is that he basically reverts back to his human form, at which point Beta Ray Bill knocks him unconscious. And so when Beta Ray Bill sees the hammer of Thor fall, he examines it and out of curiosity picks it up. And when he does, he's endowed with the power of Thor. And so Odin, realizing what's going on here, takes Beta Ray Bill and Thor away and then has them basically duel to a battle to the death. But partway through this battle, Odin begins to realize the worthiness of Beta Ray Bill. And so what he does is he gives Beta Ray Bill a version of Mjolnir, of the hammer of Thor, in the sense that it's called Stormbreaker. What this hammer is basically an exact copy of Thor's hammer. The difference here is that this hammer was designed specifically for Beta Ray Bill, and this is the reason why so many fans love the character of Beta Ray Bill. He was the first person to be able to wield Thor's hammer outside of the Asgardians themselves. Now, the next person on our list is Captain America. Now, Captain America wields Thor's hammer for the first time in 1988 in Thor Volume 1, issue number 390. Now, what we find is that in this story, during a confrontation with a minor villain named Grog, who only appeared in about 15 comics or so, that Thor and Captain America are basically ambushed. And so the result is that during the fight, Thor is separated from his hammer, and that basically Captain America, in an act of desperation, picks the hammer up and then throws it to Thor. Now, of course, during this time, Captain America uses the hammer to beat up a couple villains and so on, but nonetheless, this was the very first time we ever actually saw this happen. Now, a lot of Marvel comic fans really knew this time was coming. They knew that at some point along the line of Captain America's continuity, he was going to pick up Thor's hammer. But this was a really cool instance, and this is the reason why, for a lot of you guys who saw the Age of Ultron trailer, when Captain America had budged the hammer of Thor, that Marvel Comics fans flipped because they thought this was going to be the time when we finally get to see Captain America pick up Thor's hammer in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, the next person on our our list comes in the form of Rogue. Now, again, Rogue is a character who picks up Thor's hammer, but not in the mainstream continuity. Rogue picks up Thor's hammer during a What If storyline, which actually came in What If Volume 2, issue number 66, with the title, What If Rogue Had the Power of Thor? And what happens here is this story largely ties into the very early days of Rogue, in the sense that when Rogue first appeared in Marvel Comics, she was basically operating with Mystique as the daughter of Mystique and trying to earn Mystique's respect. And so in order to do this, what she does is she helps Mystique break the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants out of prison. But what ends up happening here is that they're immediately confronted by the Avengers. And when this happens, Rogue seizes Thor. And when she does, she basically absorbs the power of Thor into herself. And when she absorbs the power of Thor into herself, she's able to wield Thor's hammer proper. Now, eventually what happens here, like many of the characters whose powers, or I guess minds, Rogue has absorbed, we find that Thor's consciousness sort of rises to the surface. And so what takes place here is that Rogue is ultimately, I guess she ultimately comes under the control, or I guess maybe steps into the role of Thor proper and becomes that universe's, that alternate reality's version of Thor. Now, the next person to wield Thor's hammer is Black Widow. And again, much like our Rogue story, this is an alternate universe. What this does is it gives us an alternate reality to the Age of Ultron event. Rather than the mainstream Age of Ultron event that we had seen in this story, what ends up happening is that Thor ends up dying as a result of the Ragnarok event. And of course, again, if you're curious about Ragnarok, I have a video explaining what that is. But what ends up happening here is that because Thor is dead, his hammer is simply left behind. And so with Thor's hammer being left behind, what we find is that Black Widow effectively picks it up. And when she does, she ultimately steps into the role of Thor and basically brings an end to the Ragnarok event, ultimately defeating the great serpent that was supposed to arise with Ragnarok, and then eventually becomes that alternate realities version of Thor. Now, from here, what we're going to do is we're going to transition away from Marvel characters and we're going to step into DC characters. And so I imagine a lot of you guys are really curious to see where we're going to go with this. When we get into the DC characters, what we actually do here is we pick up with the Marvel vs. DC event. And this was basically a story whereby we saw in 1996 that Marvel characters and DC characters had come together and basically fought one another. And so with issue number 2, along with several other fights, what we found was that Marvel had basically, or I guess Marvel and DC, had basically reached out to fans and said, you guys decide who it is that ends up winning this fight. With issue number 2, what we found was a conflict between Wonder Woman and Storm. But what takes place here is that during a battle with Shazam, Thor is separated from his hammer. And when he's separated from his hammer, Wonder Woman comes upon his hammer. And after reading the inscription about whoever's worthy can pick up this hammer, she picks it up. And when she does, she's endowed with the outfit of Thor as well as the powers of Thor. And she uses these abilities to basically fight against Storm. Now, from here, we jump to the final person in our list of people who have been able to wield Thor's hammer. And this person comes in the form of none other than Superman. You guys had to know Superman was going to be on our list. There's no way he couldn't be. Now, this took place during the Justice League of America and Avengers crossover in 2004. Now, again, much like Marvel versus DC, this was a crossover whereby the superheroes had initially fought against one another, but the result is that the Justice League of America and the Avengers band together to fight against all of their respective supervillains. And so what happens is that during this conflict, Thor is beginning to become overwhelmed. And so what he does is he actually throws his hammer to Superman in the hopes that Superman will be able to stave off the convergence of both of these universes. And what Superman does while he's wielding the hammer of Thor and has the shield of Captain America is he unleashes holy hell. It's one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen in the history of comic book publications. It's pretty amazing. But again, this was really just sort of a fan thing. A lot of fans really just wanted to see what would happen if Superman were able to wield the hammer of Thor. Now again, this isn't necessarily canon in the sense that because it's not part of the mainstream continuity, a lot of people don't consider it to be absolute, but for the sake of our list, we're going to go ahead and throw it in here because why not? Because it's awesome. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to an end, and let me know down in the comment section. We're going to make this kind of fun. Let me know in the comment section if you can think of one person that can wield Thor's hammer, who would that person be? Anyway, I'm curious to see what you guys say. I think that'd be kind of cool. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.